We are working problem 7.35 from page 370. So chapter 7, we have what's called support department. So when you think about it, in real life, overhead is going to be split up among different divisions, and there's going to be support departments like accounting and human resources, and in our example, power and general factory, that are going to be actually shared, right? You're just going to have one accounting department, and all your different divisions are going to need accounting, so you have to split that support department up somehow. So there's 3 methods we're going to learn. One is direct, which is what we're going to do first. Then we're also going to go ahead and do reciprocal and sequential. So we'll learn all 3 methods and we can compare them in this particular problem. So I'm going to just jump right in. We're going to split power and general factory across pottery and retail. All right, so we have some information. We have their overheads, and we have the machine hours they use, and we have the square footage they use in the factory. And so we are going to give pottery and retail each their fair share of power and general factory because we're going to do direct right now. All right, so this is all about calculating overhead, and they already do have some direct overhead. All right, so direct overhead would be things like, I guess for pottery, you might have a kiln, and so you might have depreciation for the kiln, right? So that would be some direct overhead. Same thing for retail. You have a store, you probably have some store fixtures, you might depreciate those. Things like that. So I'm going to move the book out of the way, and we're going to work direct method of allocating the support. Okay, so the first thing you have to do is figure out the proportion that you're going to use to allocate that. So we need to figure out what proportions they use. So we're talking about pottery and retail. So we're going to come up with each of their direct cost, each of their overheads, allocate those supports, service costs. So for pottery and retail, they've got 2 things going there. It tells us we've got machine hours, for which pottery uses 6,900 and retail uses 3,100, and square footage operating uses 4,000 and 6,000. All right, so we know that power costs are allocated based on machine hours and general factory costs on the square footage. So we know that because it tells us so in the paragraph. All right, so we need to figure out what proportion of machine hours each of them uses. These are proportions. And what proportion of square footage of the factory. All right. So they tell us in the book that pottery has 6,900 machine hours and retail 3,100. So that's real easy. That adds up to 10,000, right? So I'm just going to do a little aside down here. So you can see where I'm getting this. So 6,900, so this is machine hours. 6,900 plus 3,100 equals 10,000. All right, so that's real easy. I can just eyeball that and go, well, that's 69% and that's 31. But for, your problems, you might not always have them. So you need to figure out what proportion that is. So you would just take 6,900, divide that by 10,000, and 3,100, divide that by 10,000. So that is equal to 69%, and that is equal to 31%. All right, so that's the proportions we're going to use, right? So for machine hours, pottery is 69 and retail is 0.31. How about square footage? So I'll put that and that. All right. So square footage we'll do next. So square footage, pottery has 4,000 and retail has 6,000. So of course that is also equal to 10,000. Right? So 4,000 divided by 10,000 equals 40%. And same thing with 6,000 divided by 10,000 equals 60%. So up here we got 0.4 and 0.6. All right, so if we're going to allocate those, here's the proportions that we use. All right, so for power, we are going to allocate to pottery. Power, let's see how much overhead. So power has 150,000. So for pottery, 150,000 times 0.69, and that is equal to 103.5. And for retail, we still have that same 150 times 0.31, so that is equal to 46.5. All right, so we took the 150, that's the overhead for power, and we split it up 69.31. All right, that's not that big of a deal. The other thing is that we have to do general factory. Okay, general factory. And of course pottery and retail. And general factory has 160,000. And we decided that that was 40/60, right? So for pottery, that's times 0.4 times 0.6. So for pottery, that ends up being 64,000. And for retail, 160 times 0.6 ends up being 96,000. So these are our allocations of power and general factory to pottery and retail using the direct. You know, whatever their driver is, machine hours, square footage, you pick the one that makes the most sense. Of course, here in the class we would just always tell you, but so in real life, if that's a fair way to split that up, that's how you would do that. And if you want to know how much overhead went to each, you add in their direct, right? And which was 98,000 for the pottery, the direct overhead. Things like kiln depreciation, things that are specifically for only pottery. And for retail, 56,000. Right? So this is just big. So add these up, we get 265.5. And you add these up, we get 198.5. So these are the overheads that you have to allocate for pottery. Here's for retail using direct. Very simple, may or may not be the best method, but it's certainly an easy method and I like it. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is the sequential, and join me on the next video for that. It will definitely take a little longer.